Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Tanvi Khurana and with me is Vaibhav Jyotsna Srivastav, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India's Commonwealth Games 2022 medal winners hosted by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at his official residence, says India is performing remarkably well in the sports. Sri Lanka grants permission for a controversial Chinese research vessel to visit the island despite India's concerns. Indonesia, United States and allies carry out live fire drill as part of combat exercises on Sumatra Island amid growing Chinese maritime activity. Renowned author Salman Rushdie stabbed on stage in New York. Firefighters from across Europe arrive in France to douse a massive wildfire. India unveils its first saline water lantern using seawater to power specially designed LED lamps. 11 more wetlands of India added to the list of Ramsar sites, taking a total number of sites to 75 in the country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that India is not only performing remarkably in sports that it has aced historically, but also witnessing stellar shows in arenas where the country was not known before. Addressing the Indian contingent which participated in the recently held Commonwealth Games 2022 at Birmingham, at his official residence, Mr. Modi said Indian citizens stayed awake all night, supporting and praying for their victory. He said this increasing interest in sports can be credited to the stellar performances of the sportspersons. Mr. Modi said he always had complete faith in the Commonwealth contingent's ability, and today we are celebrating their success. The Prime Minister urged all athletes to meet the youth under Meet the Champions initiative of Khelo India to inspire and encourage them. He said we have to intensify our efforts to find new talent and take them to the podium. Mr. Modi said we have to create a sports ecosystem that is inclusive, diverse and dynamic. He said no athlete should be left behind.
Indian Space Research Organization ISRO received a video message from Italian astronaut Samantha Cristoforetti wishing success to the country's space agency on the Gaganyaan program. The Gaganyaan program is scheduled to launch in 2023 as the country marks its 75th anniversary of independent India. Cristoforetti's video was later shared by Indian ambassador to the United States, Taranjeet Singh Sandhu. Retweeting the video, Sandhu said he was delighted to share it on the birth anniversary of Vikram Sarabhai, the father of India's space program. In the video, Cristoforetti also discussed the joint NASA and ISRO Earth observing mission and claimed that the International Space Agency is increasing its relationship with ISRO in preparation for the next space missions. According to Union Minister Jitendra Singh, Gaganyaan is ready to launch next year and the people of Indian descent will travel to space. Sri Lanka's government has granted permission for a controversial Chinese research vessel to visit the island despite India's concerns that it could spy on New Delhi's military installations, officials said on Saturday. The ship Yuan Wang 5 is described as a research and survey vessel by international shipping and analytics sites, but it's said to be a dual-use spy ship. New Delhi is suspicious of Beijing's increasing presence in the Indian Ocean and influence in Sri Lanka, seeing both as being within its sphere of influence. The Yuan Wang 5 was originally due to call at Sri Lanka's Chinese-run Hambantota port on August the 11th, only for Colombo to ask Beijing to indefinitely defer the visit. Sri Lankan government sources said that although India had raised concerns with President Ranil Wickremesinghe himself, but it could not give a satisfactory response as to why the ship should not be allowed to dock. Port officials said the Chinese vessel was about 1,000 kilometers southeast of Sri Lanka on Friday night and was heading slowly towards the Hambantota deep sea port. Sri Lanka leased the port to China for 99 years for $1.12 billion, less than the $1.4 billion Sri Lanka paid a Chinese company to build it. According to the sources in the Indian government, the Yuan Wang 5 could be employed for space and satellite tracking and has specific uses in intercontinental ballistic missile launches. External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said Sri Lanka as a sovereign country makes its own independent decisions and noted that India would make its judgment on its security concerns based on the prevailing situation in the region, especially in the border areas.
Indonesia, United States and allies held a live-fire drill on Friday as part of annual joint combat exercises on Sumatra Island amid growing Chinese maritime activity in the Indo-Pacific region. According to media reports, more than 5,000 personnel from the US, Indonesia, Australia, Japan and Singapore are participating in this year's Super Garud Shield exercises, making them the largest since they began in 2009. On the other hand, Chinese state media have accused the US of building an Indo-Pacific alliance similar to NATO to limit China's growing military and diplomatic influence in the region. The United Kingdom, Canada, France, India, Malaysia, South Korea, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea and East Timor also sent observers to the exercises. The FBI has seized top-secret files in a search of former U.S. President Donald Trump's estate in Florida this week. Agents removed 11 sets of documents, including some marked TS-SCI, a designation for material that could cause exceptionally grave damage to U.S. national security. Mr. Trump denied any wrongdoing and said the items were declassified. It was the first time an ex-president's home was searched in a criminal probe. The list of items was made public on Friday afternoon after a judge unsealed a 7-page document that included the warrant authorizing the search of Mr. Trump's Palm Beach residence, Mar-a-Lago. It said more than 20 boxes of items were taken on Monday, including a binder of photos, a handwritten note, unspecified information about the President of France, and a clemency letter written on behalf of longtime Trump ally Roger Stone. As well as 4 sets of top-secret files, the cache includes 3 sets of secret documents and 3 sets of confidential material. The warrant indicates that FBI agents were looking into potential violations of the Espionage Act, which makes it illegal to keep or transmit potentially dangerous national security information. The removal of classified documents or materials is prohibited by law. Mr. Trump increased the penalties for the crime while in office, and it is now punishable by up to 5 years in prison.
The Chinese Air Force is sending fighter jets and bombers to Thailand for a joint exercise with the Thai military on Sunday. The training will include air support, strikes on ground targets, and small and large-scale troop deployment, the Chinese Defense Ministry said in a statement posted on its website. China's expanding military activities in the Asia-Pacific region have alarmed the United States and its allies and form part of a growing strategic and economic competition that has inflamed tensions between the world's 2 largest economies. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin visited Thailand in June as part of an effort to strengthen what he called America's unparalleled network of alliances and partnerships in the region. In Pakistan, a member of minority Ahmadi community was stabbed to death in the eastern town of Rabwa on Friday, allegedly for refusing to chant Islamist slogans. Local media reported that the accused asked him to raise slogans of an Islamist party. On refusal, he repeatedly stabbed the man and killed him on the spot. The deceased was standing at a bus stop for his usual Friday ritual. Members of the long-persecuted Ahmadi community are facing discrimination and violence in Pakistan over accusations their faith insults Islam. Pakistan's parliament in 1974 declared the Ahmadi community as non-Muslims. A decade later, they were banned from calling themselves Muslims. They are also banned from preaching and from traveling to Saudi Arabia for pilgrimage.
Taliban fighters have dispersed dozens of women protesters in Kabul almost a year after the militant group seized power. About 40 women marched through the Afghan capital demanding rights before the Taliban broke it up to by firing into the air. The fighters seized their mobile phones, stopping one of the first women's protests in months. Since the Taliban takeover, women's rights have been severely restricted. The protesters chanted their demands for bread, work and freedom, carrying a banner reading 15th August is a black day, a reference to the day the Taliban captured Kabul in 2021. Some journalists covering the march were reportedly also beaten. Salman Rushdie, the Indian-born British author whose writing led to death threats from Iran in the 1980s, has been stabbed as he was about to give a lecture in southwestern New York State. Police confirmed Rushdie was stabbed at least once in the neck and at least once in the abdomen on Friday after an assailant rushed to the stage and lunged at the 75-year-old writer just as he was being introduced to the audience. After being airlifted to the hospital where he spent hours in surgery, Rushdie was on a ventilator and unable to speak on Friday evening. Andrew Wiley, his book agent, wrote in an email to the Reuters news agency, "Salman is likely to lose one eye. The nerves in his arm were severed and his liver was stabbed and damaged." Police identified the suspect as 24-year-old Hadi Matar from New Jersey. Major Eugene Stanislavski of New York State Police told reporters on Friday afternoon that officials do not have any indication of a motive at this very early stage of the investigation. They said they believed that Matar was acting alone. Stunned attendees helped pull the man off Rushdie, who had fallen to the floor. A New York State police trooper providing security at the event arrested the attacker, while a doctor in the audience helped look after Rushdie until emergency services arrived.
In today's Hotspot section, All India Radio News Special, the Startup Revolution in India. In conversation are Sharat Kohli, economic analyst, and Arjun J. Chaudhary, AIR correspondent.
The startup revolution in India, the schemes of the central government has ensured that a typical entrepreneur can pursue his dreams not only in terms of identifying a business opportunity and then the market to be served, but also able to provide a unique management team in order to carry out that opportunity and the market to be served. Sharad, how do you see the schemes and policies of the government facilitate?
Well, if you see the traditional way of starting business in a country like India since independence and up to the point when the Startup India mission was launched, the starting business was like either you pump in your own money, borrowing from relatives, your parents, your friends, your family, and so on and so forth. Or you go to a bank, you knock the doors of a bank and go for the traditional method of funding, that is go for a working capital loan or go for a term loan, or you go for usual financing where you have to submit a project report. The bank may or may not approve it. And also that method of funding was very time bound because you had to return the loan in a certain period of time. It was quite expensive as well, I must say, because traditionally the interest rates in India have been very high. I mean, it came down, but again, we are witnessing the interest rates being on the rise because of international factors. So I think this happening in 2016 of Startup India revolutionized the whole process. I think it gave a new, lease of life to the way entrepreneurs do business, to the way they start business. So Startup India was set up. There was a whole team set up by Government of India which looked after, and they said, okay, if you're starting a business, register with us so that we know we can help you. Idea of registering with Startup India was not red tape. It wasn't about bureaucracy. It was about taking within its fold the entrepreneurs who wanted genuinely companies' help and support in starting their businesses. And I think India's youth, India's being a very young nation, 65% of people being under 35 years of age. And that is what the startup ecosystem is all about. Most of the startups that we see, Arjun, they come from the age group of 35 and under. Although we've heard of startup, as they say, exception proves the rule. I have seen a startup being launched by an 80-year-old man as well. I've seen recently a startup by an 85-year-old person as well. But then those are exceptions. And the government said, come and register with us. Not because we want to regulate you, not because we want to probably boss around you, but because we genuinely want to help you. And I think this help came in so many ways, as you said, Arjun. The help came by way of the biggest help, as you were mentioning, is funding. Because the biggest problem that I have a genuine idea, I've got a very bright idea up in my mind. I know my idea is viable. I know my idea is going to be profitable. I know my idea caters to most of the people in the country, but I don't have the money. That's where I think Startup India came, and that was the biggest help, that connecting the entrepreneurs to funding agencies, angel investors, high net worth individuals, to overseas investors. Also, the Startup India set up fund of funds. If you remember, 10,000 crore was the initial capital outlay for the purpose. So this was directly helping in funding and connecting the startups to fund. And besides that, there were tax breaks. There were help in getting skilled manpower. There was help in how to go forward in terms of taking your idea down to ground realities. There was help with regard to coordination with various other government agencies. There was help with regard to recruiting of people. There was help with regard to setting up of your office. Where should your office be? What kind of structure you should have? Should you have a company? Should you be a partnership firm? Should you be a proprietor? Should you be an LLP? Should you have, how much of private equity should you have? So I think practically 360-degree help as far as the business is concerned. Never before, Arjun, has India seen such kind of friendly department which was actually propelling the whole startup ecosystem in India. So I think if India has today become the world's third biggest startup system after China and America, it is only because of Startup India mission. And the Prime Minister, Modi, was very passionate about startups. I mean, when he used to talk about, let's not be job seekers, let's be job givers, let's be job creators. I think I heard some voices from the opposition that this is more about talking, this is more about a gimmick, this is more about branding. And, all sorts of allegations were levied, I remember at that time, that this is just an excuse to probably get away from the problem of unemployment in the country and so on and so forth. But then I think the whole mission proved all of them wrong, because the way the startups came forward today, we have over 65,000 registrations in the whole startup. There are so many unregistered startups also in tier 2, tier 3 cities and in the rural belt also. So overall, I think it's been a revolution. I just don't call this as Startup India. I call this as a revolution, Arjun.
Well, and the foundation of the startup policy or the revolution in India has been how the business is incorporated. You mentioned about companies and partnerships, and now you also have hybrid companies and partnerships available, which provide features of limited liability as well, and the opportunity to bring in investment from a variety of different parties. You mentioned about high net worth individuals who usually operate as business angels, venture capitalists, and private equity as well. My question to you is, what has led to this growth of startups, great, to become unicorns, billion-dollar businesses? How is it that they've got access to capital markets and that level of public financing for the business, like Nykaa, like Zomato, like Paytm?
Well, I think what does an investor, if I answer your question looking at different side of the coin, if I was an investor, say, based out of Singapore or based out of US or based out of Japan or based out of any country, Dubai, for example, what would I look before I put my money in? I think that is where the answers lie. I would like to see who the person is, whether the idea is unique, whether his idea is saleable, whether his idea is scalable, whether his idea caters to most of the market in India, whether his idea going forward is going to materialize into expansion, whether his idea is actually contemporary to the modern world requirements. I would like to see all these things. And I think when the Indian startups, there are more than 100 unicorns in India right now. And for the sake of the listeners who are not aware of what a unicorn is, any startup which reaches a valuation of $1 billion, which is around close to 8,000 crore rupees today, is called as a unicorn. In fact, now we've started talking of decacorns. That is $10 billion. If you reach 80,000 crores of valuation, then we have, a few, if not too many today. So I think the whole concept needs to be understood in the manner that I launch my business and I put some seed capital, say borrowing from my friend, a very small amount, we call it as bootstrapping, or call it I put my sweat equity or whatever. Now, what I throw up the idea before investors, and the investor finds that my idea is brilliant. I mean, it can convert to big business opportunity today. So the investors comes forward by way of a presentation. And then, we pitch for investors. It's called in the technical jargon garden of startups. And while pitching, one of the investors likes this idea. There's loads of money floating around the world looking for brilliant ideas, for brilliant returns as well on their capital. They come forward, they put the money, and then for whatever hard work that I have done, for whatever is the cost of my idea, for whatever legwork I have done, for whatever sweat I have put in my business, I get the investors' money. And the moment investors' money comes in, I get a certain valuation. And this valuation which makes it as a unicorn, or which makes some of them as decacorns, and which makes some of them as brilliant ideas for tomorrow. But in the current situation, it is very easy to get investors' money, or it has been easy over the last few years, although the last 1 year, I must say, has been full of challenges. We've seen, because of the international financial or economic situation, we've seen certain amount of fund drying up, and we've seen certain startups being left stranded as well. They didn't get the second round or the third round of funding. Because of that, they had to do some layoffs as well, and some of the very well-known startups, some of the startups which you named just now, also are facing challenging times. So what our startups need to keep in mind, I would also like to use this opportunity to give a word of advice, because I've been a startup mentor for a significant number of years. I've been titled as startup guru as well. So I would like to give a word of advice here that I think our startups should, if they focus more on the bottom line, valuations are good, brilliant. I mean, it makes us as a $1 billion company in no time. But then if we focus on the bottom line, that is, we try and throw ourselves in the world of profits sooner than we think of. I think that will be the turning point, and we will be easily able to overtake China and America. I can tell you with conviction here that we'll be able to easily go forward and take this to the next level, because what has been happening is that a gloomy side of startups says that a lot of them have failed as well. But then India is such a vast country, and you only will know unless you've tried your idea. But the reason for failure is that sometimes the startups lose their direction. So I think it is better for them to remain focused on bottom line, make sure that their business objective, business aims are very, very strictly maintained. And they should also be very dynamic in the thinking, because the situation in startup changes sometimes overnight. The regulations change, the markets change, the consumer perception changes. You have to face the problem of attrition. There are so many challenges with startups face, but I'm sure, our entrepreneurs, when they decide to quit their jobs and get into their own businesses, they are ready for those challenges. So I think if the present storm which the startups are facing right now, they're going through a bit of stormy times, because we saw inflow of $1.6 billion, for example, in the month of April. This was half of what we saw in April 21. So there are challenges, and that was purely because of the international economic situation. We saw the interest rates rising, where the investors want to switch their capital from risky to risk-free assets. We all know the laws of economics and finance. We've seen flight of capital from the country, even from stock markets. But I think in these challenging times, our entrepreneurs, if they are able to hold their nerve, if they are able to hold themselves together, remain in the fray, I think they will come out as winners. I have no doubt about that. And the stock market being opened as a sector of financing for them, I think has gotten a new avenue for them for funding. They now just don't have to look at HNIs. They don't have to look at angel investors. They don't have to look at those big capital funds. If they can knock the doors of stock markets, I think this is the new avenue. And we've seen Paytm, we've seen Zomato. They have ups and downs. I won't say that all the IPOs have probably been bumper, or they've collected very good amount in the beginning, but later they saw some erosion of capital. But I think this is part of the teething troubles when you're hitting the stock markets for the first time as a startup. Some ups and downs are going to be quite obvious.
Thank you so much, Sharad, for giving us such an insight into the startup industry.
Thank you so much.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates around the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
An English filmmaker widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in the history of cinema, Sir Alfred Joseph Hitchcock, was born on this day in 1899. He was known as the master of suspense. In a career spanning 6 decades, he directed over 50 feature films. His films garnered 46 Academy Award nominations, including 6 wins, although he never won the award for Best Director despite 5 nominations. A desk report.
The Hitchcockian style includes the use of editing and camera movement to mimic a person's gaze, thereby turning viewers into voyeurs, and framing shots to maximize anxiety and fear. Born in Essex in 1899, Hitchcock was studying engineering at London County Council School of Engineering and Navigation when, in 1914, his father died suddenly, prompting him to drop out in order to help support his family. Highly interested in the then new industry of film production, he made his first foray into movie making when he was hired at the London branch of famous players Lasky as a title card designer. There he gained experience in writing, editing and production management and was eventually assigned his first film as a director, The Pleasure Garden in 1925 and The Lodger, A Story of the London Fog in 1927. Later he went to Hollywood and made his American film debut with the Selznick International Pictures mystery Rebecca in 1940. Even more iconic thrillers would follow, including Notorious, Dial M for Murder, Rear Window and To Catch a Thief. In 1955, Hitchcock expanded his reach into television, producing and hosting the anthology series Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He would remain best known as a filmmaker, however, directing beloved films like Vertigo, North by Northwest, and perhaps the most venerated thriller of all time, Psycho. Hitchcock passed away on April the 29th, 1980. He was 80 years old. All India Radio pays tribute to all-time great Alfred Hitchcock on his birth anniversary today. Valsa Williams, AIR News, Delhi.
India has added 11 more wetlands to the list of Ramsar sites to make a total of 75 Ramsar sites covering an area of 13,26,677 hectares in the country in the 75th year of independence. Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change said the 11 new sites include 4 in Tamil Nadu, 3 in Odisha, 2 in Jammu and Kashmir and 1 each in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. Designation of these sites would help in conservation and management of wetlands and wise use of their resources. The Union Minister of State for Science and Technology, Dr. Jitendra Singh, on Saturday unveiled India's first saline water lantern, which uses the seawater to power the specially designed LED lamps. The minister visited the Sagar Anveshika, a coastal research vessel operated and used by the National Institute of Ocean Technology, NIOT, Chennai, to review the progress of the implementation of the Deep Ocean Mission of India. The saline water lantern will bring ease of living to the fishing community living along the 7,500-kilometer long coastal line of India.
In France, firefighters from across Europe came to the country on Friday to battle a massive wildfire. Meanwhile, fire also raged in Portugal and parts of England faced a severe drought. The French officials said that high temperatures and a worsening drought brought a high risk of new fires breaking out in Gironde in southwestern France. Firefighters from Germany, Romania, Greece and beyond were on the ground to help France to extinguish fire in the region. As the media reported, much of Europe has faced weeks of baking temperatures that have also depleted water levels. A quick look at the headlines once again. India's Commonwealth Games 2022 medal winners, hosted by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at his official residence, says India is performing remarkably well in the sports. Sri Lanka grants permission for a controversial Chinese research vessel to visit the island despite India's concerns. Indonesia, United States and allies carry out live fire drill as part of combat exercises on Sumatra Island amid growing Chinese maritime activity. Renowned author Salman Rushdie stabbed on stage in New York. Firefighters from across Europe arrive in France to douse massive wildfire. India unveils its first saline water lantern using seawater to power specially designed LED lamps. 11 more wetlands of India added to the list of Ramsar sites, taking a total number of sites to 75 in the country. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Central African Republic on their Independence Day. That we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.